and welcome to our fourth Healthy Oceans, Healthy Minds talk this evening. My name is Karina and I'm Projects and Events Officer at Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful.
I'm Nicola, I'm the Community Development Officer at Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, and together me and Karina both work in the Live Here, Love Here team.
Thanks, Nicola. Firstly, we'd like to say a massive thank you to our supporters, Ocean Conservancy. That's too hard for me to say. They are an international conservation body, and we are the national coordinators for them here in Northern Ireland. And we'll stick a bit more in the chat about them later on. So we are delighted that you're able to join us tonight with a series of talks called In the Deep End. We'll be hearing from some wonderful people, all immersed in nature, health, resilience, and communities. All connected by their love of the outdoors and how it impacts them, their work, and ultimately their mental health as well.
Great. So through the campaign, we want to reconnect people to our seas and waterways and outdoor spaces. And we want to show the impact that a healthy river and marine environment can have on our health and well-being. And we want to create a society that values the outdoors and the benefits that it can bring. So this is now our fourth session, and we're still finding our feet. I don't think we'll ever be professionals at this webinar Zoom game. So we hope that you find this session valuable and worthwhile, and if not that, we hope you find it entertaining. So there's a few little Zoom rules that we need to cover before the session begins. So we will be recording this session, and we have it set up to record it on speaker view. So only the person that is speaking will be recorded on the camera. And we do hope to play some videos with this session. This will be our first webinar where we will be trying videos. So with this, we would ask that maybe during the talks, if everybody could turn off their camera, as we hope it will then boost the bandwidth and hopefully it'll allow the videos to play clearly. But also, if the videos don't play, if you could quickly give us a wee shout in the chat function, and then we'll be able to come up with some sort of alternative for that. But fingers crossed that it all works for us. And yeah, so we have the chat function, and this is just maybe an opportunity for everyone to kind of say who they are, where they come from, what maybe if they're involved in a group, a swimming group, might be nice to hear all about the different ones throughout Northern Ireland. We know we've got some other visitors from England and across the water, so great to have you all with us. And then we'd like to have a question and answer session at the end. So through the presentation, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat, and they might be picked up as we go along, but we definitely will have a good time for question and answers at the end. So if there's anything that we haven't covered or you want a bit more detail about, you can come back on camera, use the raise your hand function, or pop it into the chat box. So hopefully we've got all the ground rules covered. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nicola. So as Nicola mentioned, we're all becoming more aware of the benefits of the outdoors and what it can bring, especially when we immerse ourselves in it and we look after it as well. So one of the ways that that's become more and more popular is through open water swimming. So when we were planning this campaign, we knew that an element of this would be encouraging people to get in the water. So we wanted to make sure that we're promoting it as responsibly as possible. So that's why we're doing this session. It's probably a bit strange to coming from an environmental charity, but that's the reasons behind it. So also that taking that first plunge or dip can be a really daunting experience as well. So Steve and Norma have a wealth of experience and knowledge on the subject, and they'll be talking us through everything you need to know, including tides, weather, equipment, and just general advice as well. So welcome, Steve and Norma. Thank you so much for giving up your time this evening. It's really grateful that you can join us, and we're really looking forward to hearing all about your experiences and your advice. So we'll hand it over to you guys.
Hi everyone, I'm Norma and I run Immerse Hebrides. So myself and Steve have teamed up through a bit of training really. Steve is the training guy, and he's at one end of the country and I'm in the Outer Hebrides. So my background in swimming is competitive when I was a teenager. So I am a pool swimmer mainly. But once I started doing triathlons, I realized that I actually just loved the open water. It was just completely different. And I just really wanted to do loads with it. And I was a volunteer with our triathlon club and then just moved on from that. And the benefits really just, well, the mental and the physical benefits just overtook me. And I decided I wanted to start Immerse Hebrides. So there's not a lot, I am an open water coach, but there's not a lot of training specific to taking people into the sea. So I teamed up with Steve and we worked out a sort of bespoke course for my own team, and then it just sort of took off from there. Ourselves, we're delivering training throughout the UK. We've got people actually from Canada and Iceland on our courses, and so that's what myself and Steve are doing. But I'll let Steve add on a little bit to this as well before we start our own presentation.
Thanks, Norma. It's a real privilege to be able to chat to everybody today. Thanks very much for having us along. I actually grew up in Ballymena and spent a lot of time in Portrush, Portrush, the regular stomping ground of people that go in the water, and worked in Cushendall for a good few years. I'm very, very fortunate that I worked in outdoor education and have a real passion for kayaking and all things water sports, in so much so in 2012 I rode across the Atlantic Ocean and have spent a fair bit of time in and around the water, which puts me in a perspective of having experience of what the weather, the impact the weather has on you when you're in the sea and the tides. So I've got an admission, that is that I wouldn't class myself as an open water swimmer. When I swim in open water, it's normally because I've either fallen out of my kayak or I'm trying to get my surfboard back. And that's where Norma comes in, because she's got lots of experience of swimming and guiding people. My background experience is more to do with the environment and a little bit more about the kind of theory of it. I've also been a lecturer for the last 16 odd years, and I teach on a marine sports science and weirdly a surf science course in Newquay. So I'm based down in Cornwall now. I'm just going to share my screen with you because we've got a little PowerPoint just so that we can have so we just don't go off on a tangent just chatting, because there's a risk that could happen. Okay, so this evening's session isn't a course. It's not really like, right, we've done that session with Norma and Steve. Let's put our speedos on and jump in off Port Ballantrae or whatever it is. So what we've done is we've taken, we've been running since the first lockdown, a course, which is a 4-week course. It's 1 hour taught sessions per week, focusing on a different theme. The first week being all about tides, the next one about weather, the next one about rips, and the final one about equipment and hazards. So we've kind of cherry picked a few little bits of that to give you a flavour of some of the things that we're doing, and to give you a broad brush overview of some of the things to consider when you go open water swimming. So the first thing we're going to talk about is weather, how to interpret a forecast, and also how we can use this information to plan our swim. And there are a huge number of different websites and apps and places you can find out weather information about. Again, Norma and I come from slightly different backgrounds, and the apps and the places that I look for weather are different to the ones that she uses. But the most accurate forecast, in my opinion, is the one that you use most regularly, and you can interpret that as to what it looks like when you get to the beach. A classic example of that is I use Magic Seaweed a lot. I do a bit of surfing, and every time I come home, Portrush, Magic Seaweed always gives Portrush this amazing forecast, and it's never as good as it says it's going to be on there. But actually that's really useful, because I know that's the case. I know what the forecast means or what it says, and I can interpret that to the location. because over a number of years, I've got used to what does that mean. But windy.com is one that Norma uses a great deal. So she's going to talk to you a little bit about that just to start off with.
Sorry, Steve, I'll need to share my screen now.
Yeah, okay, I'll get off.
Okay, just give me a second, people. Share. Right, I hope you can all see that. So this is Windy, and you can get this on your phone. You can download it on your phone, and it's almost just as comprehensive on your phone as it is on your browser. And I like it because it's colourful. That's not the only reason, though. It's got lots of features on it. So I'm down the right-hand side, you can see that's your menu bar down the right-hand side. And when I go in, I always look at the wind. So the darker the colour is, the windier it is. And that's right, because we're being battered up here in the Hebrides around here. So you can put your location into the top left-hand side and, you know, whatever port you're at or beach, and it should direct you straight to a weather picker for that area. So I'm going to switch it now. I'm going down to the menu bar on the right-hand side, and I'm going to switch it to waves, which is what I always look at before I plan a swim. So on the, I'll zoom in a little bit, if I can just zoom in a wee bit, and then I'm just going to go to where I'm familiar and just click on an area there, and you'll see this picker comes up. And if you click on the down arrow, a menu should come up below. Now that's just zoomed out. Sorry, just give me a second to get back to the menu. Right, that's it now. Okay, so once I've clicked on an area, it gives you lots of information down at the bottom. And remember that I'm looking at swell and waves just now. This isn't about weather, but it does give you wind speed down at the bottom there, just on the top row. So at the moment you can drag your cursor along and you can do a forecast for, say you want to go a swim on a Sunday morning. Just put your picker in where you're going to go, and then you can have a look down here, and it gives you, I mean, where I am just now, you can just see the wave height and that second measurement down in orange. That's crazy waves height for swimming, and generally speaking, you know, we wouldn't be going out in that. Even something at 1.5 meters, when I take groups out swimming, it depends where you are and what bay or beach you're on. But I really, you know, I would exercise caution with that in a group. Different if you're out with a friend, and you just want to, you know, you kind of know where you're going, but probably about 1.5 meters is probably the max. So you've got your swell and the direction, the arrows there show you the direction as well. Also, you can have a sea temperature as well if you want. So this is just national average temperatures. There's currents. The currents are, you know, I wouldn't rely too much on the currents, but you can get currents for places that are known for fast currents. It will show up on the app. And so the sea temperature is all right, but a lot of us are taking thermometers out with us anyway, I think, just to check. But it does give you an idea of the average throughout the year. So before I go a swim, I will always go on to Met Office first, just to check the general weather, because I find that is the most reliable, and it's the inshore forecast. Just the app on my phone, and then I'll go to Windy and check the swell direction, the swell height. If it's bad on one side of the island, then we've got the luck of going to the other side, because we're small enough to do that for a bit of shelter. But I would recommend that everybody has a look at Windy. If you're using one already, a different one, then that's absolutely fine. Just stick with that, because I totally agree with Steve. Stick with the one that you're used to, because you do get to know the patterns of them. But that is Windy. So I would recommend, if you've not got any weather app, this would be one to start with, but use it in combination with Met Office. Don't rely wholly on one app. Okay, is that okay to hand over to you now, Steve?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Norma. Okay, I'll just put the presentation back on. Okay. A few things just to be aware of is when we look at the forecast or when we listen to the forecast, wind direction is given from the points of the compass. So if you were in Portrush, a northerly wind is blowing towards the beach, which is known as an onshore wind. And an onshore wind locally will create quite a lot of chop, so it can be quite difficult swimming. And also when you're in the water and you're swimming, the wind doesn't tend to affect your movement, but it does affect the sea state. So when you get an onshore wind, you tend to get lots of chop. It doesn't mean you'll have necessarily big waves. That's a different process, but the local wind can create a lot of chop. So that's an onshore wind. Whereas again, I'm using Portrush as an example just because everybody kind of knows where it is. An offshore wind would be a southerly wind. It tends to be a bit warmer and it keeps the sea nice and flat. But if there's a big low pressure out in the Atlantic, you might still get waves coming in. And that's the sort of wind direction that surfers are looking for, a nice gentle offshore breeze. And then other directions are a combination of that. So you can get cross shore, which is the wind blowing across the beach, or cross onshore and cross offshore. One of the things that's quite useful if you're trying to get an indication or an idea of what the wind speed is whenever you look at like inshore waters forecasts and things like that, it gives the wind speed in force, which is the Beaufort scale. And the Beaufort scale is really useful because actually, if you look at a forecast and it gives you the wind in speed, let's say for argument's sake it is 20 to 28 kilometers an hour. Who knows what that wind speed is? Nobody really, when you look out the window, knows what that is. But what you can see is its impact on the environment around you. And a force 4, for me, is a real threshold wind speed, because a force 4 is when you start to get white horses, like the white capping on the top of the waves. And the Beaufort scale is really a good idea to get an idea of the environment, how it affects the wind difference between wind speeds affect things like trees and flags. So it gives you an idea of what the wind speed will be like. Keep in mind, if the wind is offshore and anything from a force 4 and above, that as you swim further away from the sea, it's going to become progressively rougher and the wind is going to become stronger because there's less resistance as that air comes off the land onto the sea. So if you swim out in a force 4 or above, actually it will very quickly become quite difficult to swim in. The other thing within a lot of forecasts it may give you is the sea state. So the sea state is, oh, I didn't realize that was a video I'd put in there. This is me going for a swim at our local beach here. The sea state is quite important because depending on what sort of environment you want to swim in, not necessarily the video that we have on here, but actually you might be looking for a nice calm day swim. So when it talks about sea state, you're looking for calm or even smooth, and smooth is kind of this kind of image that we have here. The other thing in forecast, which is very important, is the visibility. So if the visibility is per, that means that it is 1,000 meters or less of visibility. And if you're going to be going out on the water, either swimming or in any craft at all, I would suggest that you really want to be going out only when it's moderate, good, or very good in terms of visibility. Because if that visibility reduces and you lose sight of the land, it is incredibly disorientating. And without a compass, which I don't know many people take a compass swimming, without a compass, it's really difficult to work out where you've just come from. So visibility is really important. There we go. Visibility, very per, less than 1,000 meters. Per is 1,000 meters to 2 nautical miles, which is just slightly longer than a land mile. And then, so I would suggest moderate to very good is in the forecast is what you're looking for. Moving on from weather then on to tides, because tides can have a huge impact on us, a lot more so arguably than the wind when we're in the water. And so a basic understanding of the tides, now obviously on the course we go into a little bit more detail on this. So I'm going to just give you a quick once over, because what I don't want to do is just say, this is a tide table, this is how you read it. I think to understand it, we need to have a slight understanding of what causes tides and the general background. The tide is created because of, if you imagine the Earth, first of all, as being round and having no land on it at all. And it's acted upon by the moon, which is quite close to it. So the moon you can consider to be, it's a bit like a big magnet. And the moon is pulling, having a force on the Earth. But the only part of the Earth that can move is the water. So the moon will pull water towards it that way there, creating a deep area or a high tide on this side. Now, in this particular alignment, we have the moon and the Earth and the sun over here. Now, the sun's much bigger, so it has a much greater gravitational force. But you'll notice it is also a lot further away. So we have the moon pulling water this way, creating a high tide on that side. We also have the sun on this side, which is pulling water towards it this way, creating a high tide on that side. And so what you end up with, if we imagine this is the Earth, is we have the moon pulling the water one way, the Earth, the sun pulling the water the other way. And we have a high tide here, a high tide here. We have a low tide here and a low tide here, which means in any 24-hour period, we have 2 high tides and we have 2 low tides. And it takes 24 hours for the Earth to do 360 degrees turn, which means that we've got just slightly more than 6 hours to go from low tide to high tide. And then another 6 hours, we go from high tide to low tide. And so it continues as the Earth spins. And that is effectively how our tides are created. But that alignment changes throughout the month. So 1 week later, we end up with this alignment. Now we have the moon pulling water this way. And for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So that means that when we get a bulge of water here, we get a bulge of water here. We have the sun pulling tide water this way. And for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So water's pulled that way. So in result, or the result, is that we have water being pulled that way and water being pulled that way. So actually, the tide is nearly even. It's not really a big tide. It doesn't come in a long way and it doesn't go out a long way. And so that tide, sorry, I've got something in my eye. That tide is different, that the tidal height, the vertical distance, is a lot less. And that's called a neap tide. And you can remember that because a neap tide is near even as possible. The tide doesn't come in much and it doesn't go out much. A week later, we now have the position where we have the sun, the moon, and the Earth in alignment. That's creating a large tide on this side. And again, because we have an equal and opposite reaction, a large tide on that side. And so we're back to where we were before. And that's called a spring tide. 1 week later, we have a neap tide, and then a spring tide, and then a neap tide, and then a spring tide, and so on and so forth. So in 1 month, we will have 2 spring tides and 2 high tides. And that difference in the amount of tide that goes up and down changes between those tides. Okay. So you can see it here. If you look out at the sky at night and it's a full moon, you're coming up to spring tide. A week later, it's a neap tide. A week after that, spring tide, then neap tide, and then full moon again, and we're back to a spring tide. And our whole time, that whole the concept of time alignment. How does that affect us as swimmers or anybody who's in the water? Well, it means that tide moves in 2 directions. We have a vertical up-down movement, which you can see in this diagram at the bottom, which is called tidal range. So the tidal range is how much it comes up and down the beach. So if you are walking I don't know, if you go down to Cushendall Beach, for instance, and it's a spring high tide, there isn't really any beach to walk on. And if you go at low tide, 6 hours later, there's lots of beach there. So that has an impact in terms of how much beach there is, but it also can mean that you may get cut off. You may not be able to get to certain areas walking on a spring tide. Whereas in a neap tide, the water doesn't come up as much and it doesn't go out as much. And so that has a big impact on not only access, but also if you go for a swim and you leave your stuff on the water's edge and the tide's coming in, that tidal range will remove all of that stuff that you've left. And best case scenario is you're walking home with no car keys in your swimming costume, trying desperately not to look like you've lost all of your stuff. The other tidal movement that has a big impact on us in the water is tidal stream. Now, this is a slightly bigger topic, so we're only just going to give you a basic outline of it. But in effect, the tide doesn't come in and go out, and that I think confuses a lot of people. So the tide doesn't come towards the shore and go away from the shore. The tide actually goes up along the coastline, and this diagram is of Cornwall. So when the tide hits Land's End in the corner there, it splits and it goes up to the Bristol Channel, and then it goes along the bottom up the English Channel up towards Dover. And so that movement means that when you are on a beach and you look out of the water, the tidal movement is actually going either from left to right or from right to left. So if you were at White Part Bay, which has a big, long, massive beach on it, when you jump in the water and the tide is coming in or going out, if you just swim straight out in a straight line, you won't go in a straight line because you're on a big floating carpet. That tide will take you one way or the other. So if you wanted to swim the length of White Part Bay, then it's worthwhile finding out what direction the tide's flowing, because actually, if you swim with it, you'll go really quickly. If you try to swim against it, you probably won't get to the other end. The speed of that movement isn't equal either. So if you are going to go and have a swim or jump into the water, the speed of the tide, the change of the tide, it changes throughout the 6 hours. And I've got a quick diagram here or example here to help to explain that. If we take my water bottle here, what I've done is I have indicated high tide up here and low tide down here. Now, if you consider, to make things as easy as possible, imagine that low tide is at 12 o'clock midday. Now we've got 4 tides in the day. That means low tide is at 12 o'clock, which means that high tide will be just after 6 p.m. If we divide this distance, let's say it is 6 meters of tide. So the range is 6 meters going up and down. If you divided that into 12, we can use that as an indication to understand how fast the water moves in. So we're sat on the end of a pier. We've got our bare feet hanging over the end of it. We're daydreaming and watching the tide come in. It's 12 o'clock midday. There's no water. The tide is out. But between 12 and 1 o'clock, we will have 1/12 of the total amount of water comes in. That's only half a meter if the tidal range is 6 meters. So between 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock, the tide just comes in a tiny little amount. But between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, we then have 2/12, 1 meter of water that comes in. So twice as much water. Between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, we now have 3/12 of water. That means the water is rising really quite rapidly. Between 3 and 4 o'clock, we again have 3/12. So that water is rising very fast indeed. Between 4 and 5 o'clock, now the speed starts to slow down and it goes back to 2/12 of the water. And in the last hour, it's just touching our toes as we've got them hanging over the end of the pontoon. That between 5 and 6 o'clock, we only have 1/12, half a meter of water which comes in. I'm going to show you that again, but I'm going to hopefully the second demonstration will give you an indication of the speed of the water. Okay, we're on the pontoon. It's midday, the tide is out. It's out, and now we're getting to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So by the end of that demonstration, if anybody forgot to go to the lavatory before this, you probably are running off now. But in essence, what that means is that during the 3rd and 4th hour of the tide, it tends to be, and these are general principles, it tends to be moving the fastest. So if you're going to go for a swim and you want the tide to help take you along, generally they both kind of correlate. So the vertical movement, when it's moving the fastest, the movement along the coast is roughly the fastest as well. It's not exactly that, because the geography, the shape of the coastline has an influence on it, but as a general principle, that's kind of how that works. And so where do we find out information about the tides? Well, you can get them on apps. You can look it up. If you just Google the tides, you tend to only be able to get it for 7 days. The easiest way is just to get yourself a tide table for your local beach. So if you go into certainly a chandlery, which is like a sailing shop, or a fishing tackle shop, they'll have tide tables. This costs £1.50. It's not too expensive. But remember that tide table is for a specific location. So you could have a tide table for Bangor, for instance, or you could have one for Portrush, Port Stewart, and they would have different times in them. So when you open up the tide table at the start, this is for Falmouth, which is on the south coast of Cornwall. When you open it up on the inside, it will have a list of other locations, other ports, and it will tell you how much time you either need to add on or take off, depending where you are. So if high tide in here is at midday, and I want to go for a swim at Bristol, and I want to know what the tides are, if I look in here, it says I need to add 2 hours onto that time. So actually Bristol will be 2 o'clock in the afternoon rather than midday. And that's because, as I said earlier, the tide, when it's coming in, is coming in and going up the Irish Sea and up that way. One thing that's slightly different for you, where you guys are in Northern Ireland, is that the incoming tide actually comes through the top between Ballycashel, Cushendall, and Mulligan, and so an incoming tide is coming down that way. So it's worthwhile finding out what that direction is in your location. The other information that's on here, you won't be able to see on this because it's too small, so I've blown it up. On the left-hand side, it shows you there's 4 tides in that day. We have a low tide, high tide, low tide, high tide, and the time. So we can say the low tide is 3:30 in the morning. That's not really relevant for us because we're not be swimming at that time. But high tide is just after 9 in the morning. And then the number here, this is the height of the tide. This is the vertical distance going up and down. And it's taken from it's called chart datum, but it's a mathematical depth. It's not actually from the seabed. So we can see that high tide is just after 9 in the morning, it's 5.1 meters, and low tide is at 4 in the afternoon. Okay, going to pass back to Norma now, just to have a chat about what to do when you get in the water. Just need to unmute there, I think, Norma.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. I hope you're not confused with that, but don't worry if you are, because it took me weeks, months, to get my head around the tides. But actually Steve's demonstration of it is one of the best that I've ever seen. No amount of reading really made me understand it until Steve started taking his bottle and water out. So I have made a little video, and it is geared towards those who are trying open water swimming for the first time. So if you are experienced, you'll probably already be doing this. So I will just start sharing my screen just now. It's just a few minutes long. If you wouldn't mind turning your videos off if you haven't already, and I will just get this wee video going. Okay, oops. Right, can you all see this? Are you able to see the video? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. I'll just press play now then. Hi, I'm Norma from Immerse Hebrides, and in this short clip I'm going to show you how to get into the water safely. I've taken a number of considerations in my choice of location. For a first time swim, you really should be just going in on a gentle sloping beach or somewhere with steps that you can get in and out easily. The most important thing you should consider when you go for a swim is, can you get out? And often people forget this when they're overtaken with but really you've got to think about whether you can get out or not. So it's a nice, gentle, sloping beach with no hazards really, apart from a bit of seaweed. I am wearing just about everything you need to go into the sea. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to show you basically the maximum equipment you can have. But this is one of the most important things that I bring with me. I put my phone in there. Obviously I have a VHF radio as well for other purposes, but I always have that in my bag as a backup. Whistle, that's your very basic. Pop that around your neck and tuck it in your wetsuit. Earplugs, if it's cold, you want to protect your ears from surfer's ear, swimmer's ear. Gloves, maybe, maybe not. The watch, I would wear a watch just to time myself. Obviously I've got my toe float for visibility. It's not a buoyancy aid. Nice cup of hot chocolate and a wee bit of chocolate as well there. It's time to get in. We've covered all the weather, forecast, tides, local knowledge. We have somebody with us. You've got a spotter or you're in a group. But really, for your own ability, you really need to know what you're capable of when you go into the sea. And you really only find out by experience, and this is why you should never really go in on your own, especially in the beginning. Always go with somebody more experienced. For your first sea swim, you should never go out with your depth. You've got a lot of factors to consider, like how you're going to respond to the cold. So when you get into the water, you should never go beyond your waist until you have passed that cold shock response that you get when you enter cold water. So just take your time. I'm just putting my hands in first because you're going to use your hands. I'm checking my watch too. I want to see how long I've been in. So I put my hands in, splash my neck. Lots of thermal receptors on your face and neck. So get those areas in first. You can slowly dip under or you can just go for it and put your head under. But because your waist height can always pop up and get your feet maybe lie on your back. You're going to start to feel the buoyancy of your wetsuit and your legs will lift. You've got to be careful that you're not floating somewhere out of your depth at this point. You start to feel the water going into the wetsuit, which is what you want. So on the next one, I'm going to scoop. Scoop. Lift your knees up. Let that water go all the way down to your wetsuit. Something has spooked you, or you're just feeling exhausted with the buoyancy of the suit. Flip onto your back. Relax. But also it expands your chest, so you can start to get your breathing under control again. Be sensible, be safe, enjoy your swim. Okay, I hope you all managed to see that okay. I hope there was no problems there, but that's mainly geared towards beginners, but we should all adopt that principle every time you go swimming, is just check out the tides obviously beforehand. Steve's gone over all of that, but your entry, exit point, just making sure that you know the area or you're with somebody who does. And I will just hand over to Steve for the next part.
Thanks, Norma. So the next part, we on the course that we do, every week we have an online quiz using Kahoot. So this is the opportunity just to see how closely you've been paying attention to what we've been talking about. I'm a bit nervous because I created the quiz at a different time than I created the PowerPoint. So there might be some questions in here we haven't covered, but we'll find out in a minute. So if you've not used Kahoot before, if you've downloaded it to a mobile device, just tap on the tile and it'll ask you for a PIN to enter the quiz. So the PIN is up on the screen now, is 9564392. So if you type that into your mobile device, and just whilst we're waiting for a few folk to join us, what will happen is when we start the quiz, a question will come up. I'll read out the question for you, but your phone or your device will just turn into 4 different colors. For each question, there will be 4 potential answers at the bottom, and each one's a different color. So all you have to do is press the color that you think is the right answer. If you want to win this quiz, and everybody wants to win this quiz, you've got to do 2 things right. The first thing is you have to get the answer right. And if you press the wrong one, you can't unpress it. And secondly, you have to be the fastest person to do that. So you get your points are worked out on getting it right, and then on being the fastest person to do that as well. There's a few more folks starting to join. Okay, so I think we're going to make a start. If you're not able to join us online, you can do this at home with pen and paper if you like. Okay. Oh, there's a couple more people just joining now. Okay. Oh, there's more people joining. Okay, going to give it just a minute more and then we're going to make a start. Okay, so we're going to start now. Each question is timed, by the way. First question, what causes tide? Well done. It is the gravity from the sun and the moon. Well done, everybody. So Jill is in the lead. Well done with that. Next question. How long is there between high and low tide? It is 6 hours, 6 minutes, just slightly more than 6 hours. Well done. Nearly everybody got that one right. What's the scoreboard looking like? Okay, bit of a shuffle round. True or false? An ebb tide is the tide going on. Oh, I didn't say this. Oh, 6 and 6. Okay, so an ebb tide is actually the tide going out. That is true. The tide when it's coming in is called a flood tide. So when the tide's coming in, it's called flood. When it's going out, it's called an ebb. Oh, there's a bit of a mix-up in the scoreboard now. Question 4. During which hours does the tide tend to move the fastest? It is between the 3rd and 4th hour. So if you remember the water going into the container, Third and fourth hour, the water tends to be moving the fastest. Okay, question 5. What is a spring tide? Okay, well done. Karina panicked apparently and pressed the wrong button. You've got to be cool as a cucumber to be good at this. So the spring tide is the highest high tide and the lowest low tide. That's the definition of a spring tide. That's mixed things up a little bit. Question number 6. What is tidal range? Quick. Tidal range is the vertical distance up and down that it moves. Remember, if you go into the water and it's low tide, when you come back, anything that you left on the beach will probably have floated away. That's because of the tidal range. That's mixed things up again. Question 7. What times are the high tide? What time's high tide today? Yes, it is 6:06 in the morning. Well done. Last question, true or false? The best way to acclimatize in cold water is to dive headfirst into the water and hold your breath. True or false? Okay, there's a lot of reasons not to do that. Well done. Let's have a look at the scoreboard at the end and see how we're doing. 3rd place, Paddy Scotsman. 2nd, well done, Maria. In 1st place, and this week's winner. The runners up at the bottom, Nicola and Stuart. Well done, isn't it? Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. It can be, some people find it really stressful, but it's quite a nice way just to review what we've talked about this evening. Just going to go back to my PowerPoint a second. Okay, just so you're aware, we're going to take questions. Norma and I will take questions in a second. Just before we move on to that, there is some availability on future courses if anybody would like to learn a bit more. It's been, I hope you found it useful. It's been a bit of a flying visit, so sometimes it's a bit easier to take time. We'd spend a whole session just on tides, another whole session just on weather. Actually, we've done 4 hours worth of presentation in 30 minutes here, so we've flown through it. So apologies for that. When's the next session running, Norma? What's the date of it?
The next intake is the 30th of November, so that's a Monday evening. And yeah, we've just started one yesterday. So, and after that, it's January the 4th and 7th.
Cool. And the other thing, a couple of really exciting things we've got coming up that some of you might be keen to sit in on. We've got an interview with Professor Mike Tipton, which is happening in a couple of weeks. Professor Mike Tipton is based at the University of Portsmouth, and he is one of the world leaders in terms of cold water exposure and its physiological effects on the body. He's the main advisor to the RNLI, and he also advises on government policy in terms of keeping people safe in the water. So that's really exciting. If you have seen any RNLI videos about cold water shock and Float to Live campaign, you'll have seen Mike Tipton in that. We've also got Malcolm Ball, who owns Snug Wetsuits, and he makes custom wetsuits for swimmers and for people. So he's going to come in and talk about the sort of features that you should look for if you're trying to choose a wetsuit. So that's really good as well. That'll be in the next couple of weeks. I think that's it. Norma, have you got another?
I did have another short video of just exiting the water and what we should do, but we can chat about that actually, because I think after that quiz everybody's probably a bit a bit stressed. So yeah, it was just to explain, you know, what you should do when you get out of the water, which is get dried and dressed as quickly as possible. You want to get your top half done, and just don't hang around chatting. Maybe move around a wee bit once you're dressed. Have a hot drink, maybe a sweet snack, just in case you do feel the cold a little bit too much. When you start shivering, that's okay. You can shiver. Most people shiver. That's just a normal response to being immersed in cold water and when you come out. So just make sure that you take your time warming up, though. Once you've got your clothes on, take your time after that. Drink your hot drink, chat with your friends. Don't jump into the car and to the shower up the road, because that can cause a condition called afterdrop, which is pretty unpleasant. If experienced in a car, driving, or in a shower, you can pass out, you can be quite unwell. So just take your time drinking and warming up from the inside, but get ready quickly on the outside. I was seeing there was one question, and if somebody hasn't read it, it was the best times to go swimming around high tide. So generally speaking, we would probably recommend that you go around the hour before, the hour after high or low tide, just in case no one saw that in the chat.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. It's been really brilliant listening to all your top tips in that like whirlwind talk. So thank you so much. And if you do want to learn more, then the guys are doing their courses and stuff. So we will share more information about that as well. So Maria has just asked in the chat, or is it Maria? Someone's just asked when the Mike Tipton event is.
Sorry, yeah, that's the 11th of December at 8 p.m. So the tickets aren't on sale yet. We've just had quite a busy week this week, that's all. So we'll be putting the tickets up for sale probably over the weekend, or by Monday anyway. So, and it's a free event. So really, you know, it's not one that you should miss, because I'm really excited about it myself.
Yeah, me too. I think I'll be there as well. Before we go into everybody else's questions and stuff as well, then our signature question that we're asking everybody. It must be the third webinar of this week that it's just messed me up. Sorry about this, guys. Nicola, do you want to ask our signature question?
Yeah, so basically, like, as you know, the whole like schedule or sessions of talks are about healthy oceans and healthy minds. So our signature question is, what does the coast mean to you? Big question.
You can go first, Norma. Well, I have been surrounded by the coast most of my life, being an islander. But for me, it is once I got myself out of the swimming pool and understood what it was like to feel immersed in the sea. For me, it's a lot more than just swimming. I actually feel like I'm immersed in the whole island. And just the wildlife, the seaweed, I absolutely love it. I think it's just so good and healthy for us to be in a slightly different environment, but remembering also that we are guests there. So just being careful with, you know, when you get into the water, what you do, and leaving no trace. So just really enjoying it.
I think for me, the coast and the ocean is absolutely everything. Like Norma says, it has so many benefits. Just being by the sea. I go home, not for a long time now since lockdown, but I go home. My parents are based on Portrush most of the time now. And when I go up to get out of the house, to give us both space, I go and have a walk along the beach, and there's nothing like it at all. I'm very, very fortunate to have spent about just less than 2 months on a little rowing boat in the sea. And it's an amazing environment to be in, to be surrounded by some incredible creatures, and it makes you really appreciate how important that environment is, and that we don't put anything in it that shouldn't be in it. And more than that, when we go to the beach and we go to the water, that actually we bring something back to us, because it gives us something every time we go there. So I think it's a really good principle to have, that when you go to the beach, you pick something up that shouldn't be there and bring it back, because those bits of plastic and litter and increasingly face masks will cause animals to get caught up in it, and therefore potentially not be able to eat, and that's an awful thing whenever you see seabirds and stuff washed up. So it's an amazing environment, and I'm only ever sad when I'm away from it. So it's very much worth protecting.
Absolutely, it's about like protecting the space that we value, definitely. Well, now's the chance we want to open it up to everybody. So if you want to, maybe if you do want to turn your cameras on, you can maybe then ask a question live through to Norma or Steve, or else we can maybe work through some of the things that we haven't yet covered through the chat along the side. But yeah, just over to you guys.
I'm just looking at all the comments on the chat just now about what it means to people sea swimming, and we all share that common bond, I think, whether it's, you know, once a week, once a month, but it's really nice. Yeah, someone's written, being contained in the sea, it's life and freedom for me. Absolutely. That's the way I feel too, but I think everybody can agree. So is there any more questions? Someone was asking about lakes and rivers. I have never swam in a river, actually, I have to say. We don't really have big rivers on the islands. We've got lochs. They're black, they're peaty, they're squidgy. So I don't do a lot in the lochs here, but I have swam in the lakes in England. I've done Coniston. Was there anything specific about lakes or fresh water that you had a question for? I think it was was it Rosie?
I think it was Rosie, but I would also wonder about lochs as well, like, or yeah. So what about if people fish in the areas? Like, is there any extra precautions to take?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think, every time you look on any social swimming page and they talk about freshwater and fishermen, it just seems to be aggro. The fishermen are not happy with the swimmers. But in Scotland anyway, we've got rights of access. So for us, you know, we can actually go swimming. We just need to be considerate of others, you know, and let people know when we are going in. But yeah, fishermen, yeah, definitely. You know, you could basically get hooked. So that's one consideration. Swimming in lakes and lochs, there's the other side of that if you go from one loch to another, you should really wash your wetsuit thoroughly if you're wearing a wetsuit, just in case you transfer any microorganisms that aren't native to that area. You should really make sure that you're cleaning everything before you go from one loch to the other.
I would just add to that, I think I was going to say exactly the same as what Norma just said, because it can be a big issue with species, invasive species spreading. The other thing is that lakes and lochs and rivers, you'll notice a big difference in buoyancy compared to the sea. One of the great things about the sea, for me, is that it's a lot more buoyant, so it's easier to swim in. Also, it stays much warmer than the rivers and the lochs during the winter, because the sea is a massive body of water, so it takes quite a long time to warm up, and it takes a long time to cool down, whereas actually the rivers, they get cold really, really quickly. So if you're used to swimming in the sea and you think, oh, I'll just, you know, it's March time, I'll just jump in the river this time, you'll notice a big difference compared to the sea as well. Cool.
Yeah, there's a question about if you are wanting to swim in a lake or a loch, I know that there's the Northern Ireland Wild Swimming Group, but is there ones, are you aware, Karina or Nicola, of others specifically for freshwater maybe, or rivers, or?
Not really, and I'm actually typing in there. I live close to Loch Money, and I have wondered about swimming in it, so I think I might ask some local questions and find out. I know that they do, in some of the different places, they do like an annual swim, but I have never seen anybody regularly in swimming. I know that I'm not sure if it's the same, but like Ballyronan Marina, people would swim there, and in some of the NI open water swimming chats, people have then started talking a bit more about like open water, or some people have also questioned about reservoirs. And would there be any like, just have any thoughts on that?
Well, obviously a reservoir, it just depends what's at one end of it. So, you know, some of them are unsafe to swim in. You might see a sign up saying no swimming here. Steve might know a wee bit more about this as well, but I would suggest that some of them aren't safe, but some of them are. I know there's plenty in Scotland anyway that you can swim in. Are you aware of anything, Steve, in Northern Ireland?
Only that there's the access in Northern Ireland is very, very different to Scotland. And so, unfortunately, access to open space is a lot more difficult. Scotland has an amazing right to roam access where you can go wherever you want. So I don't know, but I would only swim where I know other people have been swimming and go try and swim with other people. I think there probably is some fantastic places to swim, and there'll be lochs and rivers that will be great. I'm just off the top of my head thinking about the Bann, for instance, which if it's been raining and if the floodgates are open, the water moves really quickly, and you just got to be careful in anywhere where there's flowing water, that if there's anything in the water, like especially if it's high, branches and trees and stuff like that, that can be a real hazard. So just make sure you find out from other people. And I think social media is great from that. You know, if you put a question on in the Northern Ireland swimming group, can anybody recommend a good place to go swimming? Everywhere that you can swim will have been swum by someone, I'm sure. And so it's a good place to find out information.
Yeah, and with those Facebook groups as well, there's if you go into the group, there's a search bar as well. So if there's somewhere in particular that you're thinking about, if you put that word into that search bar, it should bring up all the conversations that have been like commented on over the past, like I don't know how long it is, but over the past number of years or whatever. Glenariff is a really, really nice like freshwater place to swim, but it is freezing. And also, yeah, Loch Ness. I don't swim, but I do a lot of like water sports and stuff down in Loch Earn. But I haven't done any sea swim or like open water swimming or anything there either. I think it's probably because there are quite a lot of fishermen down that way, and there's a lot of boats and different things. So it's checking about all those things as well.
Do you also think maybe, sorry to interrupt you, Karina, but do you also think maybe there's some people don't want to give away their special places and they want to keep them just special to themselves and their group, and they don't want to like maybe publicize where the places are?
Yeah, I think that's quite and it's actually becoming more common that now, because there's as everybody knows that there's a huge surge in wild swimming, so people are trying to protect their own little spot, you know, just so it remains that beautiful, peaceful place that they enjoy. So yeah, unfortunately, but actually there are very helpful people out there, and nobody would see anybody go off on swimming on their own, you know. So and it would be really awful of us if we all just shut down and didn't, you know, offer advice to someone, because that's when accidents happen, and nobody wants that, you know. For me, I personally want to share the joy, but safely. And yes, I do have my own spots that I go myself and I would never share. But that's, you know, I think I'm doing enough of a job sharing it in other ways, so I don't feel bad about that.
Can I also ask about when is the best time to start? I know like Karina started just January, and you know, yeah, just took that plunge, but like what is the coldest months, and when would you recommend for somebody to just take it up?
Well, I find that for people here in the Hebrides, I think it's the same everywhere. When it hits winter, people are, oh, I can't do this outside, I can't do that. And then I've got this influx of swimmers who want to try swimming in the autumn, winter. And I think that's actually a really, really good time. I personally started in February. So if you go by the average sea temperatures, you're looking at the coldest months in February and March. And then it starts to rise a little bit about April, May. So it could be a good time to start in the coldest, but you really aren't there for swimming. It's just more to acclimatise, and not even acclimatising, it's just an experience really, because it is quite cold. Even if you've got a wetsuit or not, you can't really stay in too long. But yeah, I start people in the autumn so that we can get a little bit of time where they've got reasonable temperatures. So it's maybe about sort of 10 degrees. We start about 11 or 10 degrees, and then it goes down in December to about 7 maybe, and then gradually further down. So But I would recommend starting in a colder month, definitely, and then you could possibly build yourself up, so even starting in the spring and then build yourself up to a wonderful summer and then back down again for the winter. So someone had asked a question about that, someone who's in tropical waters. So you're going to get that cold shock response no matter where you've come from. So if you've never been in the UK waters before, so I would just take it easy, go nice and slow, just do what I did in that video, even just bobbing up and down for a wee while, floating about, and then do that a few times. You only need to be in for a few minutes, about 5 or 6 times, and your body starts, the cold shock response gets easier for you. So go with a friend, obviously. Don't do that on your own, but just I would tell you to start anytime now.
I feel like I have to now. No, I don't want to.
Just got one little comment on there. Norma a few weeks ago sent me a challenge, a lockdown challenge, which is about acclimatization in the shower. And you start off in the shower for 15 seconds in cold water, and then you build it up. I got to 1 minute 15 seconds. I couldn't do any more. I don't know how you guys go in swimming in the winter. I've got a 6'4" wetsuit which I wear in the winter when I go surfing. So hats off to any of you that go in without a wetsuit on, even in the summer.
It's the benefits of no wetsuit. I mean, I'm it's, you know, you think you'd be putting your wetsuit on in the winter, but I'm taking my wetsuit off in the winter. It's even just getting ready after a swim. The temperatures are lower, so when you come out, it takes longer to get dressed. If you've got a wetsuit, you've got to pull that off, and your fingers might be cramped a little bit. So I just ditch the wetsuit in the winter for me personally, and just swim skins, as they call it, and it's just an amazing experience every single time. And someone's asking about lots of jellies in the Hebrides. Yes, we had lots of jellies. So when the temperatures hit about 11, 12 degrees, no, maybe 12 degrees, then we start getting jellyfish coming in. So it's a bit of a pinball game when you're out there.
Thanks, Norma. Yeah, sorry, going back to the reservoirs question. Sorry, I forgot to answer that one. The majority of reservoirs in Northern Ireland are managed by NI Water and sort of water bodies like that. So a lot of them aren't accessible, but it is just trying to find that knowledge and working out who the right person is to find it. And I'm still finding my feet myself. So those Facebook groups and stuff are the best way to find information, because there's tons of people from all over Northern Ireland who have some sort of knowledge, and it's everybody coming together with a little bit, and you just build on it and build on it. If nobody has any more questions, I think we might wrap up tonight. Thank you so much. We have gone on a little bit longer than our hour, but thank you everyone for staying on with us. Tonight we have 4 more talks with Healthy Oceans, Healthy Minds, covering environmental art, the science behind beach cleaning, some plastic-free parenting, and some like eco swaps and stuff as well. So check those out. They're on our Facebook page and our Instagram page as well. And if you've any questions for Norma and Steve, we have put their details into the chat there, so you can message them again if you want to do any other courses, and any of their talks come up as well. But we know that Zoom fatigue is a thing, so thank you for tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for inviting us. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thanks very much everybody for listening. It's great, real privilege.